Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to take a minute to look at this draft a little bit as I talk about some things that I have as suggestions for you to think about while you're turning your outline into an actual draft of your paper. So this is the sample article. The sample paper for the personal essay first draft. It is linked in the announcement. And it is a little bit different because they're focusing on a different article, but I just thought I would pull it up so that I could have it in front of us as we're kind of talking about some of the things that you want to keep an eye on. So as I was looking over your outlines, one thing that I did really want to point out was that you want to make sure, first of all, in your thesis statements, that you're really setting up two things. One should be the idea of critical thinking, and the other should be an explanation or synopsis or reference to the situation that you're actually going to be talking about. And you can see that played out in this model here. They mention the article itself, which is the topic, but you can see that this, because they're not talking about critical thinking in this particular essay. In this essay, the focus is on the idea of careers and how people learn about careers. And so you can see that the person mentions the article and what it talks about with careers, and then specifically how that relates to their experiences in school, within their family, and through social media. So in that sentence, you see both the personal aspect, where they're talking about the different ways that they saw careers presented, and they're also talking about the topic, which in this case is going to be the article, the Skenazy article. So for us, what we're talking about is we're talking about the Lumen Critical Thinking article, and we're really talking about critical thinking, and we're talking about how critical thinking is something that we used specifically in a certain scenario, whatever it is that you picked. So you want to make sure that your topic sentence, your thesis statement is including both your personal experience that you're discussing, your personal aspect of it. So you want to use words like I, me, my, and also the idea of critical thinking as presented in the Lumen article. And I thought I would mention that because I think a lot of you have just kind of like a general idea of like critical thinking and how you've used it in the past. Some people have mentioned things like time management and organization. But in addition to those things and this kind of like general idea of like thinking and reflecting and sort of using thinking to sort through problems, I do want you to remember to specifically go back to the article and look at the characteristics that are mentioned in the article of critical thinking. So ideas from the Lumen article should make it into your paper. So instead of saying something like, well, I used critical thinking when I had to figure out how to balance my friend's party and my school life and my work life. If you're talking about something like that, look at the Lumen article specifically to see some of the skills that you used and think about how you can quote from that article. So I actually went ahead and pulled up the article. And if you look through here, you can see that there are specific things that are being pointed out that a critical thinker does. So one of your tasks in the draft is going to be to tie your examples to these specific examples. To these specific characteristics that are being presented in the article. So if your example is something like, in the situation where I was trying to talk to my employer, if you asked your employer questions about a scenario, then that would be an example of you asking probing questions, which is one of the things that's listed here. Asking probing questions. If you look down even at the chart and you see, well, when I was looking at my patient's chart and I was trying to determine what was going on here, and I was a little bit worried that something was off, I was using skepticism. So you can use actual characteristics from the article to tie this in more directly with the article we read. And that's what I'm talking about when I ask you to incorporate more specific characteristics and quotes from the article. If you're worried because in your experience, quoting means you have to take an entire sentence and put it in, and you're like, this is going to feel awkward. You don't need to do that. You can quote small parts. So if you asked a pertinent question, you can certainly put that in quotation marks. You could say something like, in this situation, I was using my critical thinking to, and then quote, ask pertinent questions, end quote, and that would count as a way of directly incorporating the article. What I want you to focus on is making sure that you're not just kind of talking about this vague idea of critical thinking where you're like, yeah, I used critical thinking because I thought about it. I want specifics that relate to the article. So how specifically is your example that you're including from your experience demonstrating some of the characteristics mentioned here? Were you showing that you were a curious and reflective person? Were you able to explore and probe new areas and seek knowledge? Were you able to seek clarification? Were you, in your scenario, in your story, were you evaluating statements and arguments? Were you working hard to distinguish between fact and opinion when you tried to, do peer mediation, if that's an example you might have included? With the specific personal experiences you've included, how does that relate to the characteristics included in the Lumen article? That's a really important part because ultimately what you want to do in this assignment is bring together your own personal experience where you use critical thinking with the critical thinking characteristics that are included in the Lumen article. So that's your major task, explaining how you used specific characteristics from this article to help you navigate a personal scenario. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarification as you move into your drafting stage. And feel free to actually quote phrases and words from this Lumen article.